Good morning, team iStrong staff. It's Miss Michelle here. Today I'm doing a virtual PD just because there's just a lot that we have to cover that's related to SEL and we don't have time in the 20 minutes. One of those things being that I have to do our mandatory suicide awareness training, which is still relevant to the work that we are currently doing with SEL. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, this is another waste of time thing. It's related, and they go hand in hand, especially because at our school, kids say, I want to hurt myself, or I want to kill myself, or I want to die quite often. So this kind of will help you to kind of understand what is a real concern, what is not a concern, how to report, who to report it, when to report it, and things of that nature. So those are the things we're going to go over. And we're also going to review the mandated protocol best practices that we are going to apply here at 287. And that's pretty much it. After this, you watch this video and the training, there is an exit ticket that's hyperlinked in the email as well that you want to complete. It's just like 4 or 5 questions, just to make sure that you understood the information, and then there'll be a space for you to ask me any outstanding questions that you may have. Now, during the physical time and the space, I will be checking in. I know I want to check in with the 4th grade team. I didn't really check in with you guys yet. I didn't really check in with the lower grades, 3K and pre-K. So if I didn't check in with you, and if you didn't complete the reflection from last week, you want to make sure you do that as soon as possible, because I'm going to be using that to know who to check in with. And like right now, I know for a fact I have to check in with Mr. Laura because he indicated that he needed support with logging in. So if you reached out to me and I didn't already address it, and you didn't write like any questions in the reflection form, please complete it so that I can work on getting to you within the next week. My last thing that I want to say before I get started in the training is I just want to shout out, Miss Taylor. I want to shout out Miss Bess, Miss Sam, 5th grade. Those are the classrooms that I have been able to get into, and I have seen a lot of progress and a lot of implementation of the protocols or the strategies that we discussed kind of almost immediately, which is amazing. So thank you all for that, for collaborating with me and just making sure that like we're doing the best that we can for our kids. And also I would like to spend next week's session on just teacher concerns, whether it's at work or not at work. So that's what we'll be discussing at our next SEL meeting. Everyone, from what I can see, I'm gonna double check, has entered their strategy. So we are in a good place and we are on track. So congratulations to you guys, and clap it up. All right, so let's get into it. Suicide awareness. All right. Oh no, I'm ahead of the game. So first things first, this is the DOE official PD on suicide awareness, prevention, and intervention. So whatever you see on the screen is provided by the DOE. Why is not showing? My apologies. All right, so here we go. So what we're going to be discussing in this training is the importance of suicide prevention. We want to prevent, discussing what the warning signs and the risk factors are, clarifying what the referral process is, and how to do a warm handoff. So if you're in a situation and the student expresses or is demonstrating certain risk factors or warning signs, how do you now refer them to, Miss Michelle or Miss Rodriguez or the psychologist and stuff like that? How do you do that handoff to the person that is licensed to deal with that situation? Okay. So first things first, why do we talk about suicide? So this is alarming to me because last time I did my research on this information, it was the 3rd. So now it is the 2nd leading cause of death of young people between ages 10 and 19. So that means that the second leading cause of death of our 5th grade class right now is suicide. That's how serious and how like deep it is. For high school students, right now, 18.8% seriously considered suicide, 15.7% made a plan, and 8.9% actually attempted. So suicide is on the brain of high school students. And then in New York, ages 10 to 17, so this is all of New York, 4,700 students were treated in the emergency room for self-injury. That means that year, almost 5,000 kids between that age were self-harming, maybe cutting, maybe doing things that would cause harm to themselves, maybe letting people jump them. There's so many different signs of what self-injury can be. So that's also something to take into consideration. 1,500 were hospitalized for injuring themselves, and 83 actually were successful. So those are all different levels of suicide awareness that we want to think about. There's the pre, there's during the crisis, and then there's the completion of it. And so there's signs in each level that we want to make sure. But these are the numbers, you know, over the last couple of years with young people and suicide, and they're extremely alarming. All right. And so with that, they found that young people who are at risk for suicide or any other negative outcomes, they need a caring and competent community. And it looks like the following, where we're all connected, connectedness, human connection, caring about each other's well-being. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone knows how, when, and where to get help. And everyone feels comfortable at all times to get help. I want you to think about, you know, is PS 287 a caring and competent community based off of this list? Are we all connected, parents, students, staff? You know, do we all care about each other's well-being? We all know we all have a role to play, but do we believe that everyone involved, all the stakeholders are playing their role? And does each person know their role and where and when and how to move forward? So those are the things I want you like to kind of think about as you're reflecting and getting this information. Like, is PS 287 that competent and caring community? Because if it is, then we know that we're setting up the correct or the most helpful environment to prevent our students from having those types of feelings. Okay. Here's a quick thing. If you didn't know what your role is, here's your role as a school staff member, whether you're the office staff, whether you are, you know, the librarian, a dance teacher, cluster teacher, I think that's what it's called, the elective teachers, whether you're an elective teacher, whether you're a classroom teacher, whether you have a different role. If you work in the school building, your staff, and so it is all of our responsibilities to understand suicide risk factors, recognize the warning signs, provide an initial response, and make a referral. That's what you do. Understand risk factors, recognize the warning signs, provide an initial response, and make an effective referral. And we're going to go over those steps and what each one looks like. So identifying the risk factors for youth and suicide. So there's 3 levels. There's the individual, the environment, and the relationship. On the individual level, there may be some issues with that child personally that's only within themselves that they're dealing with. So maybe they're dealing with some type of depression or anxiety. It may not be a diagnosis, but those types of symptoms, maybe this child is already moody. Maybe this child is exposed to certain things at home that are impacting those negative feelings. Maybe they're dabbling into drugs, that the age is getting younger and younger. Marijuana is a thing, exposure to it is a thing, cigarettes is a thing. When I used to be a family therapist and I did family sessions in a drug rehab, most of my students, my clients, who were all high school kids, by the way, they started doing drugs when they were about 9, 10, 11 years old. So we have them at a very early age where these things can begin, if they don't have the support. Relationships, right? If they don't have positive relationships, around them, whether it's family relationships, if has suicide been something that happened in the family before? Is there some type of abuse happening at home? Those type of relationships can impact how that client or how that student feels about themselves, and impacts their perception on suicide. So that's something that's important to know. And then the last thing, which I think is the biggest thing where we have the most control over when we're in the building, is environment, right? We also want to assess whether the child has access to being able to complete a suicide attempt. So their environment at home, their environment at school, what does it look like? What do they have access to? Do they have access to sharp objects? Does this child have a plan and that they're of what they're going to use means? When I was teaching 6th grade a few years back, I had a student that would unravel his sharpener and take out the sharp piece and cut himself in class, and then stick it back in and tie the sharpener back in place. Those are things that you want to look at and when you assess. So after realizing that, we learned that, okay, we can't give him normal sharpeners. He needs like a different type of sharpener or sharpened pencil already. But it was something that we had to be mindful of our environment to ensure that that student didn't have access to harm himself, right? And I'm going to go into protective factors, but these are the risk factors in these 3 environments. But there are also protective factors in these things, right? The child can have a coping skill that they use when they're feeling down or when they feel like they don't want to be here anymore, that can help them in a positive way to keep them from moving forward. There could be a trusting adult or a relationship that they value, that's pouring into them, that makes them feel good, that makes them feel safe. And it's the same thing with the environment. School, it could be a healthy, safe place that reminds them that there's something more to live for, that there's something in life that they do enjoy. So those 3 things, those 3 risk factors in terms of the different levels are like, they're interconnected, but they also can be very separate things at the same time, depending. All right, so translating theory into action. So right now we're gonna identify the warning signs, okay? So if you wanna write this down in your notepad just to have it near you, I will see if I can print out some of these things too, so to have for you guys to put them up in your classrooms and things like that. But these warning signs are important. You wanna use the acronym FACTS. F, feelings, A, action, C, changes, T, threats, S, situations. So you want to explore their feelings. You want to explore their actions. Like, what are some things that you see different, right? So changes in of any sort is a sign, right? Their feelings, if they're starting to have like a low mood all the time, and they look down all the time. Actions, what are they physically doing? Are they more aggressive? Are they harming people? Are they isolating themselves? Are they trying to be the center of attention? Like, what actions are they taking that are taking place that look different? Are they making threats? Are they threatening to harm themselves, or are they threatening to harm others? You have to look at both sides. They're both a warning sign. And then the situations, like, are they overreacting for situations that they shouldn't? Are they having an inappropriate response to situations that they shouldn't? Or maybe they should be more upset, but they're too calm. That can be a warning sign. So you want to think about facts, feelings, actions, changes, threats, and situations. All right. Your role is very critical, but it's limited. Okay. Your role is very critical, but it is limited as an educator or not a licensed mental health professional. Your role will always be limited. So this is what you can do within your realm. So when you have identified one of the risk factors, whether it's an individual risk, a relational risk, or an environmental risk, right? You express your concern to the student. You can say, hey, so-and-so, I'm worried about you. Is everything okay? Like, I noticed that you have been coming into class really sad. Is there anything going on that you want to talk about? Do you want to share your feelings? And the perfect time to have this conversation is during morning meeting if you can. And that usually opens up the door for them to talk. And when as they're talking and you're making them feel comfortable to share, you're just listening. Because what you need to know is what's up here. What is this child thinking? They made a comment or they did something that made you concerned. So you need to find out if that concern is something that is, I don't want to say valid. All the concerns are valid, but is it something that needs to be magnified, or is it something that was actually 1, 2, 3, you were able to handle it? So it's very important to listen. Don't leave the student alone. Please don't leave the student alone. If you need to pass it off to somebody, you guys actually do a really good job at that when kids say those things, to pass it to me or call me, text me. I'll come right away if you're not able to talk with them. And then the next one is to express the need for more help. And that's basically what I just said. And you guys do that already. So I don't really need to go into deep. All right. So once you've spoken to the child and you kind of already assessed the situation, you've expressed your concerns to them. Now you want to do that warm referral, that hand up. So when you do that with the child, you want to be like, wow, like this is such a concerning situation. Is it okay if, or I wouldn't even ask them if it's okay to tell Miss Mouchette. I would say, I have to tell Miss Mouchette, would you be okay with me talking to her about it? Or can I send you over with this pass and you can talk to her about it? Right? Because you want them to feel like they have some type of voice, and some kids may want to share, but they don't want to say it themselves. They would rather someone else speak on their behalf if they already, because if you already said something that was really hurtful or traumatic to you and you just got it out, and you just worked up that strength, you don't really want to go and say it again to another person and then another person and then another person. So to help that child work through that process, I always would say, ask if they wanted the person they initially told to come with them, and so on and so forth. It just helps to just make it a smoother transition and keep the child calm, okay? And so now the school's procedures for this. So really and truly, you guys are all mandated reporters. So by law, if you see something, you outrightly have the right to call the central register and make a report and file a claim. As far as best practices goes, I wouldn't recommend going about that route, mainly because when you call ACS, they're going to send out a social worker within 24 to 48 hours to address the concern that you made. Now, the social worker that they send out is going to have the same credential as me, sometimes even less credentials as me. So they would do the same type of assessment that I would do in the building if a concern was brought to me. The only difference is it's not going to ruffle any feathers with the parents, and it's not going to be an ACS. Like now they have to be monitored for 30 days to 90 days to make sure. Like this, it's such an inconvenience on a parent that it doesn't make sense to jeopardize the relationship between the parent and the school if it's something that I could have already intervened in. Like the last thing that I want to do is call ACS on a parent. A lot of times the issues that come across with the kids, either the parents do know about it, or sometimes they don't know, or sometimes they're struggling with it too and don't know how to get help. So definitely, the protocols would go like to reach out to the parent first, get some consensus from there. If whatever the concern is still happening and you're worried, you feel like the parent is not doing their due diligence to address it, definitely refer it to me. And then I can step in and assess the parent as well as the child, and then push for whatever interventions that need to be in place. Now, if mom or dad neglects to respond and neglects to reply and is totally ignoring, then that would become, educational neglect. It's some type of neglect that's happening where the child has a need and the parent deliberately is not meeting the need. Then we could talk about, okay, I might have to call ACS. And I would have that blatant conversation with the parent. I do that not often, but if it needs to come up, I don't have an issue saying like, okay, AC, this is the steps that I will have to take if mom, you don't A, B, and C. And so far, I haven't had to call ACS only on one parent out of the 3 years that I've been here. Also, a lot of times our families have open ACS cases already. So by referring it to me first before making the call yourself, I can give you that information. And then the call would just be updating their current case manager on the case as opposed to opening a whole new case. So that's just as far as mandated reporting, because I know there were a lot of concerns being sent to me about that. And I never want to take away someone's intuition of feeling a child is in danger. If you feel like that, by all means, please do call. However, best practices, I won't call unless I've had a conversation with the parent and I've investigated and looked for specific signs of whatever, whether it's abuse, whether it's of, suicidal ideations, whatever it is the concern is, there has to be an assessment that needs to be made before making a decision to report, especially because we have a relationship with our kids. They're not like random kids that we're with for a day. So there's a pattern. All right. So just to go over that again, our school's procedure is following the best practices of one, speaking to the parent about the concern first. And when you speak to the parent, you can incorporate me on it. You can send an email. Hey, I had this concern. I reached out to the parent. This is what they said. Miss Michelle, can you just keep your eye out for it? And that's it. Now, second time it happens, you're worried. You're like, nah, parent, it's not working out with the parent. This is still continuing. Then you're like, okay, Miss Michelle, I want to officially move forward. These are my concerns. This is what the parent is not doing. And then I'll we'll pull up that parent and I'll be like, okay, these are some concerns that was brought to my attention. This is what I know you've been working on with the teacher. What is support you need? Whatever the case may be, they may or may not. Usually that works and they'll tell me what it is and I can support. And if not, then it's like, okay, this parent is not being compliant. I will let them know, like, if you don't address this, then I will have to call ACS. And this is what I need you to do. And I'll back up whatever you said as the teacher. And then if that doesn't happen, then I will just make the call. Okay, so that's the kind of best practices. So there's not random reports being made by different people at the same school that has a social worker. We shouldn't really have as many mandated reports that are not streamlined because we have a social worker on site, which most schools don't. All right, so that was a lot. I hope you guys got that and that made sense. All right, so understanding protective factors. So protective factors are the factors that we put in place, like the coping skills, those positive aspects to their life that will help. Enrichment clubs, if you know, those things are positive things. Those are the outlets that students have. Those are the factors that protect them. School can be a protective factor. It could be either one. It could be a risk factor or protective. But we have to decide what type of culture that we want to have in our building for every kid, regardless of whatever situations that they're in. Some of the most common effective protective factors are trusted adult, school connectedness, socio-emotional learning, mental health literacy, access to care, and opportunities to contribute. So already I can say that there are a few of these things that we already started putting in place here. It is not a trick. This is what it is. I had nothing to do with it. But the things that we're working on is in line with what positive protective factors are, right? So if socio-emotional learning, if you focus in on that and making it tight in your morning meeting, you are already creating a protective environment for students that are at risk for suicide, right? Opportunities to contribute. If you're giving students opportunities to contribute to anything, So like for me, like they work on the kindness tree. Every kid in the school has an opportunity to contribute. Every kid in the school has an opportunity to create their own club if they would like to. So contributing to their learning, contributing to a conversation, contributing to school-wide projects, they giving them a voice to make a contribution, that helps a lot. And that's something that we do here. And we definitely have school connectedness because we have generations of kids come in here. They still come here regardless of some conflicts. So there's definitely a connectedness to the school. We have the most alumni that like went to a school and working at it. Like I think we won that award. So we definitely are in a position to maximize these protective factors to support our kids. Okay. If you're worried about a family member or a colleague, because I know this is focused on kids, but suicide affects everyone, and I want to acknowledge that, you can express your concern to them, ask them directly, listen, and make connection to community resources. You can, if you're not familiar with mental health or the field or where to get resources, you can definitely connect them to me. You can connect them to my nonprofit organization. You connect them to NYC Well or the National Suicide Prevention Hotline that's on the screen. Okay. All right, so we're gonna get into a practice scenario. I'm going to go into this one, Andre, because it's more connected to us. And I'm gonna read it out loud, and you guys will have an opportunity in your exit ticket to write your answer down officially, but you can jot your answer down right now as I'm reading the scenario. And we're gonna use facts, feelings, actions, changes, threats, situations to kind of assess what the problem is, what the risk is, and what you would do moving forward. All right, so Andre is a 5th grader diagnosed with a learning disability. He always struggled in school, but generally tried to achieve. He just had his annual review of his individual education plan, and the decision was for him to remain in a self-contained class. He seemed discouraged by that decision. Lately, he refuses to help or support with assignments, saying, "I'm too dumb to do it." He has been absent frequently with a variety of non-specific complaints. When he is in school, he often has his head down, feigning sleep. He stopped participating in the one thing he seemed to enjoy, an intramural basketball league. He only has a couple of friends, but one recently moved to another school. Andre has not been eating lunch with his other friend anymore. He just sits by himself and throws out most of his lunch. He said to the teacher's aide as she tried to help him with his work, "You don't need to waste any more time on me." So we are concerned about Andre. And he sounds very similar to a few students in 4th and 5th grade. But when we're looking at this, we want to assess his feelings, his actions, any changes, threats, or situations. So what are some of those things that you're seeing? I would right now, if I could find a buddy, whether it's my co-teacher or any adult that you can have this conversation with, this would be the time to do that, because being in your head about these things is it makes it difficult to kind of really follow those steps, because we're in our classroom. You're in your classrooms by yourself all the time, and sometimes these things could fall under your radar. So it helps to talk about it with another person, a colleague, because they might bring up something that you might not have seen or heard. But here's what you would do, talking to Andre. You decide to speak with Andre when the class leaves for lunch. You take him aside to connect with him privately. What is the first thing you would say to him when you sit down together? As you talk more, he makes troubling statements. "I know how to make this better. My mom won't have to worry anymore." How would you introduce the idea of a warm handoff? What would you say? What would you say or do if he denies there's any problem? What would you do next? So already for me in this situation, the first thing that I would do after, obviously I'm pulling him to the side after class to have this conversation. So whenever a child does something that's alarming or concerning, if you can't address it right away, definitely address it at the end of the period. But please don't let it go by without addressing it. The first thing that I would say to him is be honest. Like, our students especially appreciate transparency and honesty, but just with warmth. I noticed that you stopped playing, basketball, and you've been absent a little bit more. Is there something going on? Are you feeling okay? I would start there, right? If he's being vague and it's just like shutting down, I know how to make this better. My mom won't have to worry anymore. The next thing I'm asking, well, what's wrong that you need to make better? Why wouldn't mom have to worry? Is mom worried right now? What is mom worried about? Because we want to get an idea. It could be something that you can talk to and help him navigate the conflict. Because the thing is, you want to be sure that he's saying something, that he's really thinking about suicide and he's not just upset and in his feelings. That's what you want to decipher. Once you get that confirmation that, like, okay, he really is considering this, whether he's starting to make a plan or some sort of that nature, then you want to reach out and say, you know what? I think you want to reach out to Miss Mouchette to talk about this. Is that okay? I would feel most comfortable if you were with someone that could really support you through this. I'm here to talk if you need. However, because I'm a teacher, I might not be the best at this. Like, I'm not afraid to say that, some things like that to kids. But say what's most comfortable to you, but don't, just be honest about it. Don't feel like you have to make something up or sound like super professional. Okay? And so that is it for this training. Please, when you get a chance to complete the exit ticket that's attached in the email. There's more information on the DOE Info Hub page about suicide awareness. And if you have any other additional questions, you can note it on the exit ticket. You could come and chat with me. I will be reaching out to you, all the teachers, in the morning during this time to support with any additional SEL and just to check in, because a lot has changed with some students as well. But I hope that you enjoy your day, and thank you so much. I will see you guys in person next week in the library.